Welcome back everyone. In this video we will see part 6 of Scientific Facts and Foreknowledge in the Bible. The Bible specifies the perfect dimensions for a stable water vessel. The Bible gives essential details such as the size and proportions of Noah's Ark, that is the length, breadth and depth. Genesis 6:15, and this is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits and its height 30 cubits. The Bible does not specify the precise shape of the ark. This lack of physical description, however, is consistent with other historical accounts in the scripture. The term ark does not mean ship. The Hebrew word means box. However, Noah's Ark was supposedly designed as an ideal model of seaworthiness for it to be called as Noah's box. The Hebrew word for ark is seen only one more time in Exodus when it describes the basket that carried Moses as a baby. While the ark was a huge wooden ship, the one that carried Moses was a tiny wicker basket. The only similarity between the both is that both floated and preserved life. If the word implied anything about shape, it would be an Egyptian basket-like shape, typically rounded. The Hebrew word for ark likely means something similar to a lifeboat. The Hebrew words translated in Genesis as rooms is usually called nes, and pitch would normally be called covering, and window would be noonlight. Using these typical meanings, we can conclude that the ark was made from gopher wood, had nests inside, and was covered with a pitch-like substance inside and out. It had a noonlight that ended a cubit upward and above, and a door in the side, and there were 3 decks. The ark was 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide and 30 cubits high, which is about 450 feet or 135 meters long, 75 feet or 23 meters wide and 45 feet or 14 meters high. For many years, biblical creationists have simply depicted the ark as a rectangular box, which helped emphasize its size to explain capacity and illustrate how easily the ark could have handled the payload. With a rectangular shape, the ark's stability against rolling could even be demonstrated by simple calculations. The Bible does not mention that Noah's Ark must be a rectangular box, and also does not elaborate on the shape beyond the superb overall proportions of length, breadth and depth. Ships have long been described like this without implying a block-shaped hull. Noah's Ark could be anything from a rectangular box with hard right angles and no curvature at all to a ship-like form. Box-like shape has the largest carrying capacity, but a ship-like design would be safer and more comfortable in heavy seas. The Bible also does not record the direction-keeping features attached to the ark. Questions thus arise whether the ark was actually built to handle rough waters and survive the duration of the Genesis flood without sinking, and make it through the deluge intact with all the animals on board. The Bible gives some clues about the sea conditions during the flood. The ark had the proportions of a sea-going vessel built for waves in a mountain-covering raging global flood which floated on the surface of the waters. The Bible also states that the ark rose high above the earth and was stranded before mountaintops were seen, indicating a deep water voyage throughout. The Bible gives general summaries of the specific instructions given by God to Noah. The opening on the ark, that is the window, ends 1 cubit high all around to reflect the idea of a noonlight. In addition, the ark had 3 decks and a single door on one side of it, presumably large enough to accommodate the entrance and exit of all the animals who would be making the voyage with Noah and his family. The long proportions of the ark indicate an ark that created a more comfortable and controlled voyage without any need for speed, as the ark floated on the surface of the water. There are no all-purpose ideal dimensions for a ship. In practice, the ideal length to width ratio of a ship depends on the purpose of the ship. Sailing vessels are typically built with a larger ratio. Warships have a small ratio to attain the required speed. Cargo ships are built with a large ratio for load capacity and not speed. Even in biblical times, this would have applied. That is, ancient warships which were rowed and were fast were built slimmer than cargo ships which were sailed with large loading capacity. First, a 1993 Korean study was unable to find fault with the specifications of the ark given in the Bible in its Scientific Study Endorses Seaworthiness of Ark. In the study, the safety of Noah's Ark in a seaway was investigated. That is, the safety of the Ark in the severe environments imposed by the waves and winds during the Genesis flood was investigated. Three major safety parameters of a ship in a seaway, which are structural safety, overturning stability, and seakeeping quality, were evaluated together to assess the safety of the whole system. In general, good structural safety ensures the hull against damage caused mainly by wave loads, and enough overturning stability is required to prevent the ship from capsizing because of the winds and waves. Good seakeeping quality is essential for the effectiveness and safety of the crew and cargo on board. Though not enough is known about the hull form and the structure of the ark, the size and the material of the ark given in the Bible are enough to warrant the attention of naval architects and enable investigations of the practicality of the ark as a drifting ship in high winds and waves. Information about the hull, like its form and characteristics, is available from existing references to Noah's Ark and from reasonable assumptions of naval engineers. According to the Bible, God gives very general instructions to Noah about how to build the ark. The length of the ark was 300 cubits, the breadth 50 cubits, and the height was 30 cubits. A cubit is known to be the distance between a man's elbow and fingertip. To decide the actual size of the ark, a cubit had to be defined in terms of a modern unit. The common cubit, which is 17.5 inches or 44.5 centimeters, was approximated to the size of the ark. In modern units, the ark was about 135 meters or 443 feet long, 22.5 meters or 74 feet wide, and 13.5 meters or 44 feet high. For materials, Noah was told to use gopher wood, which some scholars think was either cedar or cypress wood. The two main options that can illustrate how the ark looked like include a default rectangular shape, reflecting the lack of specific details, and a more fleshed out design that incorporates principles of ship design from maritime science while remaining consistent with the Bible's size and proportions. Also, based on the arguments and references of several explorers who discovered the remains of the ark at some sites on Mount Ararat, the form of the ark's hull as that of a barge-type ship was estimated. The ark was supposed to have drifted at a very low speed, implying that the effect of speed was negligible, as the behavior of a ship in a seaway depends mainly on wave height, wave direction, and ship speed. To evaluate the seakeeping performance, the related items were selected based on the type of ship. Since the ark had a barge-type hull form and the speed was nearly zero, the seakeeping items such as structural safety and voyage limit of the ark were considered. The study combined analysis, model wave testing, and ship standards, and compared the biblical ark with 12 other vessels of the same volume but modified in length, width, or depth, with stability, hull strength, and comfort measured. Though the information about the ark is not enough to precisely predict the maximum wave height it could have navigated, researchers could roughly infer it from comparing the estimated ship responses to modern passenger ships' safety criteria. The study depicted an ark that did not contradict the Bible, even though it may be different from more accepted designs. It was found that the proportions of Noah's Ark carefully balanced the conflicting demands of stability, like resistance to capsizing, comfort of seakeeping, and strength, that the Ark has the same proportions as a modern cargo ship. The research design shows how reasonable scripture is, as it depicts a stable, comfortable, and seaworthy vessel that was capable of fulfilling all the requirements stated therein. The study concluded that the ark's high priority for comfort suggests that the anticipated waves must have been substantial, and the voyage limit of the ark, estimated from modern passenger ships' criteria, reveals that it could have navigated sea conditions with waves higher than 30 meters. The study thus confirmed that the ark could handle waves as high as 100 feet or 30 meters, and that the proportions of the ark as outlined in the Bible are near optimal. While Noah's Ark was an average performer in each quality measured, it was among the best designs overall. The ark's careful balance is easily lost if the proportions are modified, rendering the vessel either unstable, prone to fracture, or dangerously uncomfortable. No hull shape was found to significantly outperform the over 4,500-year-old biblical design. We know that modern ships have similar proportions. The scale of Noah's Ark is huge, near the maximum size that is known to be possible for a wooden vessel. Yet it is remarkably realistic when compared to the largest wooden ships in history, and its proportions amazingly similar to a modern cargo ship. Since the Bible gives proportions consistent with those of a true cargo ship, it makes sense that it should look and act like a ship. The earliest large ships too, depicted in pottery from Mesopotamia, not long after the biblical flood, have similar aspects like Noah's Ark, suggesting that ships included elements of the only ship to survive the global flood. Second, researchers at the University of Leicester discovered that Noah's Ark could have carried 70,000 animals without sinking if built from the dimensions stated in the Bible. They calculated that the ark could have floated even with 2 of every land animal in the world packed inside. The researchers studied the exact dimensions of the ark listed in the book of Genesis. We know that God instructed Noah to build a boat which was 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide and 30 cubits high, and recommended gopher wood for the enormous lifeboat, and Noah was given the exact dimensions to survive the flood with his family and all the animals. The researchers averaged out the Egyptian and Hebrew cubit measurement to come up with 48.2 centimeters, making the ark around 144 meters long. If the longer length of the cubit is assumed, then Noah's ark would have been 547 feet long, 91.2 feet wide, and 54.7 feet high. We know that the ark had a window, door, and 3 floors. The average mass of an animal from a previous study, approximately equal to that of one sheep, was used. The previous study also suggested that there were approximately 35,000 species of animals needed to be saved by Noah, enabling the researchers to conclude by swapping gopher wood for cypress wood that the dimensions given in the Bible would have allowed Noah to build an ark that would float with all the animals on board, that the ark with 3 floats would support the weight of 2.15 million sheep without sinking, and that should be enough to support all of the species that were around at that time. We know that the ark was built with gopher wood, which according to some researchers is cypress wood, and pitch, a tar-like substance, was used to seal the wood, preventing water leakage. The ark may not have been in the shape of modern ships built today because the purpose of the ark was to float stably in the water and not to navigate, indicating that the base might have been flat. The researchers used the dimensions of the ark and calculated its buoyancy force according to the Archimedes principle and approximate animal weights. The instructions given to Noah were tested, and the researchers were astonished to discover that the ark could have floated without sinking. They concluded that the dimensions given in the Bible would have allowed Noah to build an ark that would float with all of the animals on board. In terms of safety, modern engineers agree that the dimensions of Noah's ark made for a stable vessel. Third, in another study by J. Woodmarape, it was estimated that a minimum-sized Noah's Ark could fit an exaggerated maximum of around 16,000 genus-based required animals with maximum food, cages, and fresh water, and only about 3/4 of the Ark would be needed for all of that. If a conservative estimate of the biblical unit as 18 inches is taken, less than half of the Ark's area space was enough to have all those animals, not including food and water. Noah's cubit was probably longer. The older cubit of about 20 to 21 inches like the royal cubits used in the pyramids of Egypt and elsewhere, creating even more space on the ark. With the average sizes of animals estimated, there would have been ample room for all, even before taking into consideration the stacking of many cages. Noah only had to carry land-bound, air-breathing animals including winged creatures. The 5 million species of insects need not be considered, nor some 40,000 species of fishes and other creatures which live in the water. If we take into account how animals can diversify within their kinds, we see that Noah only needed thousands of animals and not millions to fit on his ark. The family, not genus or species, is a closer match to how the Bible describes kinds in most instances. More realistic maximum numbers by researchers yielded no more than 1,400 kinds with no more than 6,700 individuals. Minimum numbers ranged closer to 3,200 individuals. Both sets of numbers are far less than Woodmarape's absolute maximum numbers. Research says that animals can sense danger and often migrate to escape it, indicating that their migratory instincts could have got them to the ark. It should also be considered that many animals can hibernate, and predators and prey have been known to live peacefully together during situations of stress like fire, flood, or earthquake. Thus, in the ark, animal behavior probably would have been different from their normal behavior. In conclusion, the dimensions of Noah's Ark have a ratio of 6:1. The ark was 6 times longer than it was wide. This is the best ratio for modern shipbuilding. Modern stability tests have shown that the design is stable for waves up to 200 feet high and that the ark could have rotated 90 degrees and still righted itself. Scientists and boat builders agree that Noah's Ark could not only float but also hold 2 of every species of land animals, a few humans, and all of their food for 1 year, when the dimensions and type of wood used for the ark were considered. Noah's Ark as a drifting ship is thus believed to have had a reasonable beam draft ratio for the safety of the hull, crew, and cargo in the high winds and waves imposed on it by the Genesis flood. In modern times, shipbuilders have the correct understanding that the ideal dimension for ship stability is a length 6 times that of the width. God told Noah the ideal dimensions for the ark more than 4,500 years ago. Proverbs 2:6 For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. Thanks for watching. God bless you all.